I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to talk about politics again. I'm mostly interested in talking about open-minded science and religion and spirituality, stuff like that. But with the events of the past few days, I kind of feel like I have to do it. It's a force majeure sort of thing. So look, according to Marxist theory, as capitalism declines, political violence will increase. That's not an endorsement of political violence, it's an acknowledgement of the necessity of political violence, the expectation of political violence occurring as conditions decline. And it's going to happen on the left, and it's going to happen on the right, it's going to happen with the working class, and it's going to happen with bourgeois retaliations. This is especially true if the working class feels like they don't have any other legitimate means of expression. So what we saw in DC the other day is pretty clearly an expression of the expected class violence that will occur as capitalism continues to decline. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Tommy, you can't possibly be arguing that a right-wing protest, direct action, is some kind of left-wing working class action, can you? Well, yes and no. So I make no secret of the fact that I dislike Joe Biden immensely. I believe that his administration will be the most corrupt and bourgeois in my lifetime. The main reason that Joe Biden won was peeling away the white suburban vote from Trump. Essentially, Joe Biden was elected by an army of Karens, and those are who he is going to serve. In that sense, I think opposing the Biden administration from a left-wing perspective makes complete and utter sense. On the other hand, it is fair to say that these people do express right-wing views, but that's to be expected in a country where the only people who care about the working class anymore seem to be right-wingers and Republicans. Look, they're engaging in normalizing direct action against the people responsible for their immiseration. So politically, this is a left-wing action in a more objective sense, but being opposed to and willing to engage in political violence for the sake of their class interests, that is a left-wing action thing. Finally, we need to talk about how many people are analogizing this protest to the Black Lives Matter protest. The fundamental thing that these people don't understand is that Black Lives Matter and Antifa and the anarchist movement in general is a fifth column. It is a pro-bourgeois fifth column that advances the interests of the ruling class at the expense of the working class. Just pay attention, right? Who got more positive media coverage? The people 2 days ago or the people over the summer? They got millions of dollars in free, mostly positive coverage from the media. And most of the violence enacted during that protest was the disruption of the lives of poor people, of commuters, of truck drivers, burning down small businesses, etc. This is a pro-bourgeois movement that is attacking the interests of poor people and is going on for months. To say nothing of elevating to celebrity status many of the criminals who commit violence against poor people, and vilifying the police who are themselves often working class and live in working class neighborhoods. But since we're talking about legitimate forms of protest here, this was a direct action against the people who are actually responsible. Property damage was minimal, it didn't impact the lives of many poor people, and it resolved itself in a few hours. And look, there's a very important reason from a Marxist perspective why all of this is happening. The ruling class does not want us to talk about class. So they have to get us to talk about something else. They used to accomplish this by promoting racism. But of course now racism is very unpopular, and Many of the ruling class themselves are the educated ruling class who feel tremendously guilty about racism, so they can't promote racism anymore as the main class distraction. So what do? Well, they start talking about intersectionalism. They fund grants to these feminist professors at universities who claim to be Marxists, but are really just making their living writing about racism and sexism and saying that, well, it's not just class, it's class plus all these other things. Well, that morphs into, oh, no, we can just ignore class because all of your problems, if you're a racial minority, all your problems are because of racism. Systemic racism. Not systemic classism, systemic racism. But that doesn't stop the white working class from talking about classism because obviously their problems can't be explained by systemic racism. So what do? Well, you have to talk about privilege. You have to delegitimize the suffering of the white working class in order to further split up working class solidarity. And that is a thing that we have seen. That's sort of the quiet part stated out loud, right? People have been saying that talking about class is inherently racist, because we're not talking about race then. This is just a toxic tactic by the bourgeoisie to delegitimize all discussions of class. And the anarchists and the BLMers help that by going out there and not only making fools of themselves, making leftists look like crazy violent monsters, but by promoting the race agenda that the ruling class wants to impose on us to stop us from talking about real class. So is it any wonder then that the only people talking about class to poor white people, aside from Bernie, are the racists? Like, if talking about class is racist, then the only people talking about class will be racists. But what I think is perhaps the most disgusting thing is that here, police shot a protester, murdered her. Ashley Babbitt is her name. That's what's being reported. Are we hearing anything from the police violence people? Most of the coverage I've heard has been woman died, implying that it was the protesters who killed her. I suspect that they won't care going forward about this act of police violence. Look at the restraint, right, of the people who were there. A police officer murdered an innocent protester effectively in cold blood. There's no evidence at this point that she was carrying a weapon. And the protesters haven't gone on to vilify all police everywhere. This will only stop when the working class puts aside racial differences and unites under a common class identity and conversation and begins to do direct action not against each other, but against the people really responsible for this. In the days ahead, I wish everyone safety, but I think to call innocent protesters who are taking real direct action, to call them a violent mob, that's a poisonous road to walk down. Take care.